In this video, I'm going to offer you a very nice exercise, and I will do that by showing you a very spectacular game played between Vidit, who is one of India's top players, rated 27-31, and he's playing against Peter Svilder, 8-time Russian champion, absolute top player. And I think this exercise is going to be really useful for you, as you will be challenged to develop a plan yourself, and it's based on a very spectacular idea. I'm pretty sure you will enjoy it, so let's just go straight into the action. Vidit is playing with the white pieces and opens the game with the move 1 c4. e5, we have the English opening, and now white goes for the move g3, and black plays very modest move d6. So I will briefly go through the opening. There are a lot of different ways of playing the English opening for both colors, but rather than going to explain you all the ins and outs, I would like to go to the critical moment very quickly. So white goes knight c3, and black goes for the aggressive move f5. And obviously, white can play the move bishop g2, fianchettoing the light squared bishop very quickly, but Vidit has a different idea in mind, as he goes here for the move d4, and black plays the move bishop e7, so keeping the tension in the center, and he's always ready to recapture on e5 in case white decides to do so. Interestingly, a few weeks prior to this game, Svilder had this exact position with the white pieces himself against another Indian top player, and Svilder went here for the move knight f3, and after black's move e4, the game got a very closed character, but Vidit has a different idea in mind and plays here the move bishop h3. This may look a little bit strange, like the bishop goes one square too far. Normally you would see this bishop on g2. And after knight a6, white decides to take on e5, d takes e5, queens are getting swapped on d8, and of course black will recapture with the bishop, so will not give up the right to castle. White goes knight f3, attacking the pawn on e5, and obviously bishop f6, defending the pawn, could be a serious candidate move, but instead Svilder goes for e4, attacking the knight, and now the knight comes into d4, and together with his bishop on h3, the pawn on f5 is under threat. Black defends the pawn with g6, and white brings out its remaining minor piece to f4. Black goes c6, very useful move to take away both the b5 and d5 square, not allowing any sort of annoying knight jump. White castles queenside, knight f6, and white now would like to open up the position so that the rooks can become more active, and therefore the move f3 was played. Black decides to take it, e takes f3, e takes f3, and now the king comes to f7. There doesn't seem to be any need to castle here. You can just place the king close to the center. It will be good for upcoming endgames when pieces are getting traded. And white goes for rook h2 to e1. So obviously white seems to have a nice little lead in development, and black plays here the move bishop e7, getting the bishop into play. And this is in fact the starting position I would like to discuss with you. So if you would like to take your time, feel free to pause the video here for a second and try to come up with a plan yourself. Now I would like to discuss what are the objectives here for white. So first of all, it seems to me that white is very actively placed, having nice rooks on the open files. Its pieces are nicely placed, but the main problem for white is that there is no way to penetrate into black's position, as basically all the key squares on the open files, they are controlled by black pieces. So therefore the white rooks are unable to enter, particularly on the 7th rank, for instance. That is just not possible. And when we look at this exact position, there are also some of white's pieces which are not doing that much. And then I'm mainly talking about the knight on c3, which is not badly placed, but it cannot really come forward because black's pawns on c6 and f5, they're controlling a lot of these squares, which means that the knight is pretty useless at the moment. Also, this bishop on h3 looks like it's not doing that much, but how will you try to improve your bishop? That is the main question here. And in order to answer that question, I think we should not look at what are the available moves for the bishop, but rather try to think, where would you like your bishop to be? And once you ask yourself such a question, you can come up with creative ideas, and you will realize that the bishop will preferably stand on the diagonal so that it can attack the king. So if the bishop will be able to come over to the a to f7 diagonal, that would be absolutely great news. But for instance, if you do play a move like bishop to f1, well, things are not that clear at all. Black can even consider placing a piece on c5, and then it will not be clear how the bishop can be improved, because at the moment it's still staring at its own pawn on c4. So then the second idea could be try to open up the position with the move g4. That is in fact quite an interesting idea, which was not played in the game, but definitely a typical idea for such positions. One of the ideas here would be that if black is going to take the pawn and you do recapture, now taking with the bishop on g4 would not be such a great idea, because then there is bishop takes g4, knight takes g4, black is a pawn up, but now black is missing its light squared bishop, and here beautiful tactic enabling the rook to enter on d7 here is the move knight takes c6, with the point that after b takes there is a rook to d7, and after rook a e8 to protect the bishop you do have bishop d6. This looks like a very nice plan. Of course, it's not a forcing line. Black will have probably different ways of neutralizing the pressure, but it's definitely an idea I like to see. But back to the game, as instead of playing the move g4, by far the best move, and this was played by Vidit in the game, it's the kind of move probably you didn't consider at all. And that's why I'm showing you this example, that try to think out of the box, as the move c5 was played here, and you may think, wait a second, black just placed its bishop on e7, guarding that square together with the knight. That is just a free pawn. But the main point now is that whichever way black is going to capture, let's say he's going to take with a knight, there will follow the move bishop to f1, and on the next move bishop will come in to c4 with a lot of pressure hitting the king, and the king doesn't have that many great squares to go to, because it also got to retain control over the bishop on e7. So for instance, first of all, if you do play here the move b5 to cover this square c4, there's knight takes c6. White regains the pawn with massive threats hitting the bishop on e7. All white's pieces are coming alive. There are so many weaknesses. Black has a very hard time here. So then the alternative could be to get the rook into play with rook d8. But then the bishop comes in to c4 with check. And as I said, the king got to keep the bishop defended. So let's say you go king f8, but now the bishop comes into h6. King will be forced to go to e8, and now it's bishop to g5 with such a huge pressure against the knight on f6, against the bishop on e7, which is pinned. If the king goes out of the e-file now, then you have this huge blow with the move rook takes e7, removing the defender, sacrificing the exchange. But the main point is that after king takes, you'll play here the move rook e1. Now the king got the move. If you go king d7, then it's bishop takes f6, and you have an overwhelming advantage with so many pieces looking in the direction of the black king. It's two minor pieces versus a rook, and in case of rook e8, you'll probably just keep the rooks on the board to initiate an attack against that king, and black is still having a lot of issues here. Back to the game, as after the move c5, instead black decided to capture with the bishop. As you understand that in the other line the bishop on e7 was hanging in a couple of variations, so it does make sense to consider this move. But anyway, we play the move bishop to f1, not with the idea to take on a6, training off the bishop for the knight. No, we would like to get that bishop to the c4 square to deliver a very devastating check. Rook e8 was played, So black is trying to exchange some rooks. That would be great news. But anyway, the move bishop c4 played with a lot of pressure against the king. If the king goes back now to f8, then you have this beautiful mating pattern of the two bishops, which is the Boden's mate. You remember that one? If you haven't seen it before, make sure you check out the top 25 mating patterns you should know. It's all covered there. Beautiful mating motif with the two bishops. So therefore the king will not go to f8, but has to go to g7. And now everything still seems to be defended. Black is a pawn up, the rook is defended, but very importantly, this bishop is joining the game. And we continue now exerting more pressure on black's position. And the key move here, bishop e5 with a very strong threat, taking on f6 with check. If black does recapture, then the rook on e8 is hanging. Look what happens here. Black played the move knight c7, protecting the rook on e8 with a knight. But you think, hey, wait a second, that knight can just be taken, right? Well, in that case, there is this move bishop takes d4. Very important, as rook takes d4 hangs the rook on e1. That cannot be recommended. While if you do take on e8 first, then there is knight takes e8 and everything is still under control, because if white captures the bishop on d4, then black is able to take with its knight the bishop on c7, and black is still a pawn up in this endgame. So don't be too greedy. This knight is not really hanging. It's very nicely defended indirectly. So here the next question. So you are a pawn down and black's position is hanging by a thread. But how are you going to increase the pressure? Try to determine what is the main weakness in black's position and how can you try to attack it. These kind of questions you always should try to ask yourself, and that will bring you to the right move, because the following move played by Vidit is once again kind of a move you may not even consider yourself. But once you understand that the knight on f6 is the main problem, you will try to look at moves to impose more pressure on that particular piece. And the key move is g4. Fantastic idea with a big threat of playing g5, attacking the pinned knight. The knight cannot move away because of that pin. And if you do take the pawn, then the main point is that there is bishop takes f6 with check, king takes f6, rook takes e8. You think, well, this was also possible without the move g4. But the key idea is that now, because of forcing that exchange, the f5 pawn is no longer there, and the e4 square has become available to the knight. It's knight e4 with check, and it's a fork. So on the next move, you do capture the bishop, and it's game over. So g4 is once again a very nice, subtle pawn sacrifice, trying to improve the placement of your knight on c3, while at the same time, of course, there is this big threat. Even g takes f5 with the idea of opening up the g file could be a great idea, as there are plans of getting the rook over to g1 to give a check and deflect the king from protecting the knight on f6. Therefore, black's position is really falling apart now, and too many issues, too many problems to deal with, and black decided here to get rid of that pin by taking on e5, sacrificing the exchange. But that doesn't really reduce the pressure, because after rook takes e5, the bishop is under threat, so no time to take the pawn on g4. And if the bishop goes back to d6, then it's on an unprotected square, attacking the rook. But there's knight takes f5. If you do recapture, it's rook takes d6, and white is penetrating with its rooks into black's position on the 7th rank. Therefore, black really wanted to maintain the bishop on c5, played here the move knight d7, attacking the rook, but at the same time, it will take more moves for black to untangle. The rook goes back to e1, just keep it simple, and now the knight came over to b6 to attack the bishop. And if you would go away with the bishop, now it could be there's the possibility to take on g4, And black does have 2 pawns for the exchange. And most importantly, white cannot enter with its rooks on the 7th rank, as the bishop covers e7 and the knight and the other bishop cover the d7 square as well. This would be very unclear. Let's take it back. Rather than dropping back to b3, white plays here the excellent move knight e6 check, forcing the exchange of some minor pieces, as the knight is forking some of black's counterparts. Bishop takes e6, bishop takes e6. Excellent move. If you do take with a knight, it's rook takes e6. And, well, white is just a very nice exchange up. No problems at all. Black decided to play here the move king f6. But now the bishop went back to b3 anyway. Rook f8. And now, once again, we are looking for ways to impose new threats. Even the king is a potential target. And look, Vidit played excellent move h4. Once again, f takes g4 runs into knight e4 with a devastating knight fork. You're winning more material. And of course, the idea of playing g5 could be very unpleasant as well. So black played the move h6. And here again, another invisible move, something you would probably have dismissed from the very start. It's the move f4. You're not giving up the protection of the pawn on g4, but still, black is unable to take. And this f-pawn is really useful, as after the move rook e8, there's not much else black could do. There are no great plans here at all. There is this move g5, forcing the king to go back to g7. Maybe it would have made sense to take first on g5, but frankly speaking, doesn't make much of a difference. King g7 played, rooks were exchanged on e8. And now, since the rooks were exchanged, we do have an entry. Not on the 7th rank, but the rook can enter on d8, hitting the knight on e8. Knight went to d6. But here, black is absolutely busted. White's pieces are excellently placed. And after the move king c2, black had seen enough. Now you may think this resignation is premature. And at your level, yes, but at Grandmaster level, probably this is absolutely all right. For instance, if you do play something like h5, you can activate the king. It's a good endgame strategy, bringing the king into play. And one of the next ideas will be to, after let's say black goes a5, to trade off that knight on b6. After the exchange of knights, you do have the possibility of giving a check on d7. The bishop will try to come back. We have a new target. We can try to attack the pawns. There's absolutely zero counterplay, because this bishop can never attack the pawn on h4, as the knight on d6 will be hanging. So I hope you really enjoyed this example. And for me, the key moment of the game was on move 15, when white played here the move c5, a beautiful clearance sacrifice. It's a positional sacrifice, but you understand that once your bishop lands on c4, there will be more and more tactics available for white. So once again, you see that positional play and tactical play, they go very well together. And you cannot just play only for tactics. You need to understand where to place your pieces before you're able to carry out these tactical ideas. Thanks for watching. If you would like to see more of these instructional videos, just make sure to subscribe to the channel and help it grow. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.